Around 6,000 years ago, at a time when dazzling civilizations like the Maya or Inca had yet to appear, a mysterious group of people once lived on the South American continent. For ages, history had all but forgotten their existence. These people did not build pyramids, nor did they leave behind stone cities, or pass down any legends for future generations. Instead, they lived simply, much like other ancient hunter-gatherer communities. They hunted wild animals, gathered wild fruits, and survived amid the harsh wilderness of the Andes Mountains. Remarkably, they also buried their deceased intentionally, a practice that reflected both spiritual beliefs and a deep sense of community. Yet, just as mysteriously as they had arrived, they vanished without a trace. For thousands of years, no one knew these people had ever existed on the frigid plateaus of Colombia. Everything changed only when the technology for decoding ancient DNA advanced. In recent years, scientists have excavated numerous skeletons on the Bogotá Altiplano plateau, a highland region in the Andes, marked by thin air and a harsh climate. Here, experts successfully extracted DNA from skulls and fossil samples belonging to individuals believed to have lived between 6,000 and 500 years ago. The results of these DNA analyses astonished the entire field of historical research. Scientists discovered traces of a group of people entirely unrelated to any previously known genetic branches in the Americas. They were not ancestors of the ancient Native Americans of North America, nor were they closely related to the earliest groups who migrated into South America. In other words, they represented an independent genetic lineage, not belonging to any of the major gene pools ever recorded. Their existence has raised profound questions about the earliest chapters in human history on this continent. This mysterious group was named Checua by scientists, after the excavation site near the village of Checua, north of Bogotá, Colombia's capital. The Checua mainly lived on the Bogotá Altiplano plateau, which was once among the most fertile and ideal places for prehistoric humans in the Andes. Archaeological traces show they were present here thousands of years before other waves of migration arrived and gave rise to greater cultures. This discovery not only reveals a human lineage that once existed and then vanished entirely, but also opens a new chapter in the ongoing question: who were truly the first people to explore and settle the lands of South America? About 20,000 years ago, the Earth was entering one of the coldest and harshest periods in its recent history, the last ice age. Ice and snow covered much of the northern hemisphere, causing global sea levels to drop to their lowest point in tens of thousands of years. This dramatic drop exposed a vast stretch of land known as Beringia, a natural bridge connecting present-day Siberia with Alaska. Beringia was not just a geographical corridor, it was also the very first bridge that allowed humans to travel from the Old World into the New World. Scientists believe that around 16,000 years ago, the first groups of people descendants of East Asian and Siberian populations crossed this frozen grassland. They brought with them their families, stone tools, and memories of a world on the other side of the icy ocean. For many generations, they paused in Beringia, adapting to its harsh environment before continuing their journey southward as the glaciers gradually receded. Over time, these prehistoric groups spread out across North America, South America, and eventually reached the far southern tip of the continent. Around 13,000 years ago, a remarkable culture emerged: the Clovis culture. The Clovis people were renowned for their distinctively shaped stone spear points, which have come to symbolize the great hunting age of North America. Archaeologists have found thousands of Clovis points from the east coast to the west coast of the United States, proving that they once occupied nearly the entire continent. However, recent discoveries have shaken the traditional view that the Clovis wave was the first. In 2021, researchers announced the discovery of human footprints dated to as much as 23,000 years old at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. These footprints, preserved beneath ancient layers of sediment, reveal that humans had set foot in North America thousands of years earlier than previously believed. In addition, numerous archaeological sites in southern Chile, Brazil, and even Florida indicate the presence of pre-Clovis groups, painting a far more complex picture of the migration history into the Americas. As time went on, this wave of migration continued southward. The Isthmus of Panama, a narrow strip of land connecting North and South America, became a vital gateway that allowed ancient peoples to cross and enter a new continent. Moving further south, many groups chose to settle in fertile lands with temperate climates and abundant natural resources. One of the most important stops along this journey was the Bogotá Altiplano Plateau, situated at an altitude of about 2,600 meters in the heart of the Andes in what is now Colombia. This area is surrounded by high mountain ranges, enjoys a cool climate year-round, and is rich in water, plants, and wildlife. Unlike many other regions, The Bogotá Altiplano provided the first migrants with an ideal place to hunt, gather, and build stable communities. Archaeological evidence shows that humans have lived here for at least 12,000 years, with continuous layers of habitation stretching back to the pre-ceramic era and beyond. For many decades, archaeologists and geneticists debated the origins of the ancient communities that once lived on the Bogotá Altiplano plateau. Questions about where they came from remained one of the great mysteries until advances in ancient DNA analysis truly changed everything. An international team of scientists carried out a large-scale study analyzing genetic material from 21 ancient human remains excavated from the Bogotá Altiplano. This sample group spanned many periods, from 6,000 years ago up to around 500 years ago, reflecting both the diversity and continuity of the communities who lived here. Most importantly, these DNA samples were extracted from golden sites, such as the petrous part of the temporal bone, which is known for its exceptional preservation of DNA, as well as from teeth, ensuring the reliability of the results. When experts compared the genetic sequences of the ancient Checua people with all previously known genetic samples in the Americas, they made a startling discovery. The Checua group, who lived around 6,000 years ago, represented an original genetic branch, entirely separate from both ancient North Americans and modern South Americans. In other words, on the genetic map of humanity, they were an independent lineage, not belonging to any major gene pool of peoples who have ever lived in the Americas. Further in-depth analyses using modern statistical methods confirmed this finding. These tools allowed scientists to determine the degree of genetic relationship between different groups of people, and also to detect groups with unique origins. The results showed that the Checua were not only unrelated to the famous Anzic one individual from the Clovis culture, but they also did not share ancestry with the settlers of the Channel Islands or the later farming communities of the Andes. The absence of any genetic admixture between the Checua and the major lineages of the Americas has forced researchers to completely reconsider previous theories about how the continent was settled. The Checua appeared as an outlying branch, not closely related to anyone else. This raises the possibility that there may have been more than one wave of migration into South America, with small groups that eventually vanished without leaving any descendants. But the findings do not stop there. The study also revealed that the genetic diversity of ancient people on the Altiplano was extremely complex. Some individuals possessed genetic mutations, never before recorded in modern human groups, indicating processes of evolution and independent adaptation to high altitudes and the cold climate of the Andes. The appearance of the Checua, with their independent gene pool and no connection to later migrants, poses a major question for archaeologists and geneticists alike. How many other human branches may have once existed in the Americas that science has yet to discover? And could the history of migration into the New World be far more complex and mysterious than we ever imagined? Around 6,000 years ago, the Bogotá Altiplano Plateau looked very different from how it does today. This region was a blend of vast grasslands, wetlands stretching along ancient riverbeds, and lush green reed beds surrounding the area. The defining features of this land included a cool climate year-round, nighttime temperatures that dropped very low, and thin air due to its altitude of 2,600 meters above sea level. For any community, surviving in such a high and harsh environment was always a considerable challenge. The Checua adapted impressively to this environment. They lived in small groups, hunting animals such as deer and other smaller creatures. The rivers and lakes of the area also provided fish, which became an important supplemental source of protein in their diet. Alongside hunting, the Checua were also skilled gatherers. They collected various wild fruits and seeds from native plants, including many types of starchy tubers, like wild potatoes, a staple food among ancient hunter-gatherer communities in the Andes. A distinctive feature of Checua culture was that they had not yet developed pottery technology. Instead of using ceramics for storing and cooking food, the Checua likely made use of natural materials, such as baskets woven from grass or plant fibers, as well as animal hides and tree bark to preserve and transport food. Archaeological evidence shows that they knew how to weave and used eggshells and hollow bones to store seeds or liquids. Genetic studies have provided deep insights into the Checua's community structure and familial relationships. Among the 7 ancient individuals whose DNA was analyzed, scientists found 4 pairs with close familial ties, such as siblings or cousins. This indicates that the Checua lived in small, tightly knit groups with a limited number of members. Archaeologists estimate that Checua communities were 3 to 8 times smaller than later settled groups. This fits perfectly within the broader picture of the pre-ceramic era, when ancient Andean people often lived a semi-nomadic lifestyle, moving seasonally between different areas to seek food and clean water. They built tents from animal hides and stayed in one place only briefly before moving on to a new site when resources ran out. In terms of tools, the Checua primarily used stone and bone. Their spearheads were crafted from flint, quartz, or large animal bones. Notably, they left behind no traces of cooking or food storage technology, involving pottery, a clear distinction between them and the later settled agricultural communities of the Andes. Their complete dependence on nature turned the Checua into true children of the mountains and forests. They knew how to make use of every available resource, from land and fresh water to wild plants and animals, but at the same time, they also faced significant risks from the climate and fierce competition with other groups. In the harsh and unforgiving environment of the Andes, only those communities that truly knew how to adapt, cooperate, and innovate could survive and leave traces for future generations. About 2,000 years ago, all traces of the Checua people vanished completely from the Bogotá Altiplano plateau. Archaeological sites and genetic evidence show that this region underwent a major population change. New groups appeared here, carrying the genetic signature of populations from Central America, remarkably different from the earlier Checua. They represented a new wave of settlers, now known to archaeologists as the Herrera ceramic culture. The Herrera people were not only genetically distinct, but they also brought significant cultural changes. One of their greatest advancements was the introduction of pottery, a new technology at that time in the northern Andes. Pottery allowed for more efficient food storage and cooking, paving the way for agricultural development. The Herrera began cultivating maize, potatoes, beans, and other staple crops, while also domesticating animals such as guinea pigs and ducks. This not only increased their food supply, but also enabled them to store provisions through the dry and cold seasons, reducing their dependence on the unpredictable natural environment. From a genetic perspective, ancient DNA studies have confirmed a remarkable fact. There was no sign of genetic mixing between the Checua and the Herrera. When scientists analyzed ancient genetic samples, they found that the genes of the Checua had disappeared completely, leaving no trace in subsequent generations. This is one of the rare cases of absolute population replacement, strikingly different from many other regions in the world, where incoming populations typically intermixed rather than erasing the previous inhabitants entirely. This raises a major question: why did the Checua vanish without a trace? Several prominent theories have been proposed. First, climate change may have altered the Altiplano landscape. The climate could have become drier, causing water sources and food supplies to dwindle, forcing ancient groups to migrate or suffer severe population decline. Second, competition for resources between groups may have led to conflict or large-scale displacement. In addition, the introduction of new infectious diseases brought about by contact between previously isolated communities could also have played a role. However, the most important factor seems to be the advantage of new technology. The rise of agriculture and pottery gave the Herrera people the power to expand their territory, stabilize their way of life, and ultimately replace hunter-gatherer groups like the Checua entirely. Subsequent generations, from the Herrera culture, 2,800 to 1,200 years before the present, to the Muisca culture, 1,200 to 500 years before the present, all carried the stable genetic and cultural characteristics of this new population. Notably, the Muisca evolved into one of the most complex societies in the northern Andes, famous for their economy based on salt, gold, and the legend of El Dorado, the city of gold that once captivated European explorers. Today, the Bogotá Altiplano plateau still stretches quietly beneath the shadow of the Andes, bearing layers of ancient earth that hold countless secrets yet to be deciphered. This land is not only one of the key gateways that allowed people to journey from North America deep into South America, but it is also a place that has witnessed the survival, disappearance, and replacement of many different ancient communities. With every new archaeological discovery here, entirely new chapters are revealed about the history of migration, adaptation, and human struggle for survival in South America. However, the journey to uncover the mysteries surrounding the fate of the Checua and other ancient human lineages remains a long one. Although advances in genetics have provided important answers, the truth is that we have only just begun to scratch the surface of the iceberg of history. For each of us, whether simply a history enthusiast or a dedicated researcher, the story of the Checua and the ancient cultures of the Andes serves as a reminder that the past is always full of surprises. What we know today can be completely changed by a single archaeological discovery or a new DNA sample. For this reason, the passion for discovery, curiosity, and the spirit of scientific collaboration remain the keys that allow humanity to keep moving forward, to explore more deeply the origins and journey of our own species. If you found this story fascinating, Feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts, or ask a question below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest stories about ancient mysteries from around the world.